how our space dictates how we get organized on today's Keeping You Organized. Today on Keeping You Organized, we are going to talk about space planning, and I'm not talking outer space. I'm talking in the space where you live or where you work. And to discuss that with us is Shauna Turner from the Shauna Method. Shauna, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you today.
Well, we're going to focus in on space planning, which is the physical area that someone has to live or work in. And I want to kind of start out on a broad look at kind of what space planning is and how it fits within the whole organizing work and business that you do, and some of the questions that people ask about space, whether it's too much space or too little space.
Right. So I get both of those questions on a regular basis. People frequently call and say, I just do not have enough space. I'm covered in clutter. I don't have enough space for everything I own. Or sometimes I'll get a client who calls and says, my children have left and now I have too much space and I'm wondering if I should downsize, or maybe should I consider getting a storage unit? These are all questions that come up. How can I best use the space that I have?
So what are some of the first questions that you'll sit down in that maybe first meeting with a client? They've kind of said, here's the big problem now. What are the first couple things you look at?
So I always go and do a sort of a meet and greet if I can, just to see the space. That helps me a lot too, to understand what the issue is. And we'll talk through what's causing them pain in their space. So what is it about your space that's really driving you crazy? Is it the fact that you can't walk through your front door because there's stuff all over your entryway? Or is it the fact that everyone comes in and sort of piles and congregates in the kitchen and no one uses the other spaces that you've allocated? Or is it the fact that you have so many toys and you don't even know how to put them away? So we have a look at what the space is and talk about what the question is so that we can design a solution.
What's been the biggest mismatch of stuff to space that you've kind of walked into going, oh boy, look at this. I mean, they had 5 times as much. I mean, kind of describe that situation.
Yeah, I've been in a couple situations, and frequently they get out of control because of a life event. Mm-hmm. So that can be a negative life event, such as an illness. So maybe a family member gets moved into the living room, and suddenly every surface is covered with medications and doctor's instructions and new equipment that they weren't used to having before. But it can also be a very happy reason why this takes place. Most commonly, a new baby arrives on the scene, and suddenly there's just gear that you've never had in your space before. You have a little baby, but you have just tons of stuff that you don't know where to put. Should it be upstairs? Should it be downstairs? I had one client who had a baby. It was the first grandchild. So both sets of grandparents descended with gifts out of great love, which was terrific, but the house was overwhelmed with stuff. She just didn't know what to do with it, and she didn't know how to tell her parents and her in-laws, please don't send any more stuffed animals. I don't know where to put them. Right. So that's a common situation.
Yeah, and I suppose in a situation like that, I've heard sometimes people will use a closet as a nursery if their space is really tight, and they put the little porter crib in there and have a little bit of space to work with. So, yes. Are there some rules of thumb that people go by, like you need so many square feet per person, or in a room you've got to have 3-foot aisles? I mean, do you go by any of that kind of stuff?
I don't so much. I do. There is one rule of thumb that I generally say, and that if you're going to have a coffee table near a sofa, you need at least 18 inches to walk around it, preferably 2 feet. But other than that, I really think that you can be happy in any number of spaces. So if you look at folks living perhaps in Manhattan and they're in 700 square feet total, they can be just as happy and comfortable as someone who is in the middle of the country with a 4-bedroom colonial. It's really about adjusting what you own to the space that you actually have. It's doing that reality check to say, how much space do I have? And then how much can I accommodate here? So I generally say that it's not too little space that's the problem, it's too much stuff.
Got it. Now let's talk about those small spaces, because those are probably the most challenging. What are some either types of furniture or things that maybe have multi-purpose, or maybe some of your secret tricks that you use to work in a small space, maybe a space that's used for 2 or 3 different things, that kind of thing.
So if you're in a small space, taking advantage of every inch is what's important. And I think that folks who have small spaces actually end up being more organized than those who don't, because they're aware of that limitation and try to use every little piece of real estate that they have to the best that they can. So some common places that we start looking right away are, for example, the back of a door. So many people forget that's a terrific storage location. There are multiple products available that you hang over the back of the door, and you can go to having 25 little storage locations for computer cords, or on the back of a bathroom door for the toothpaste and the toothbrush, or on the back of a closet door for flip-flops, or on the back of a playroom door for all the little pieces for toys. So the back of a door, never leave the back of the door unused. That would be my number one place to look. Another place that I frequently tend to look for people in a small space is up. So we look sort of at eye level and we think about what's at eye level, but we forget to look up because there's a lot of storage space, especially for those who have a high ceiling. So for example, let's say you have a teeny tiny bathroom and you don't have room for anything but a pedestal sink, but chances are there's space over the toilet, or perhaps even over your light fixture, where a simple shelf could be the place you could store your extra towels. So always look up. That's probably the least used space. In a garage, for example, you could hang a couple of cables and perhaps store a very large item to get it up off of the floor.
Right.
So small spaces, always a good idea to look up. And then the last thing that I would say is be creative with the space that you have. Always make sure the shelves are adjusted to the best height for what you've got to store there. Don't be limited by what it looked like when you moved in.
I think it's interesting if you've ever been on a cruise before, and those rooms are so small, and they, while you're out at your meal, they convert it from a living room to a bedroom and very small space. And I know my parents used to have a thing called a Murphy bed. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
Oh, sure.
And
I'm a big fan of things that come out of the wall.
Yeah.
I often tell people to consider putting their ironing board to fold up into the wall, because it's just practically no space at all, except when you pull it down and use it. So I am a huge fan of the walls. Always look on your walls. Maybe you don't have a mudroom per se, a formal mudroom, but a series of well-placed hooks on a wall is an instant mudroom.
Right. Let's go back to the garage for a second, because this time of year people are starting to move things around, and I know there's a lot of garage systems you can buy and things like that. Are there some inexpensive garage organizing solutions that you look at implementing for people that will just help make the space more usable?
Absolutely. And this is the perfect time to do a garage. And a garage is a great room to begin with if you want to organize your house, because what you do is you clear out sort of a staging area. So then for the other rooms, you have a place to move them. So I always love to start in a garage. And it doesn't have to be expensive. There are some very lovely, expensive systems out there that work well, but you don't have to use them. It's hard to beat pegboard. I mean, the old-fashioned pegboard, it is so versatile, and it makes a terrific use of a wall. You can get hooks of all different sizes to meet all of your needs, and you can paint it if you don't like the natural color. You can paint it to match the color of a garage wall if that bothers you. I also say just a simple plastic shelving unit from a store like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Costco. Those can be very, very effective. They're simple to put together, and you can use them to store plastic bins, which are another terrific, affordable tool to put things by category. So maybe you have your boating supplies and your golf supplies, or whatever activities your family's into. The other thing I say about a garage is, in season, I'm not a big fan of hanging bicycles. Out of season, I'm fine if you want to hang the bicycles up, but don't make that your year-round solution, because it's difficult to get the bikes on and off of the hooks, and they end up not really being put back, and then the system you set up isn't working. So I say put your bicycles off to the side, or perhaps in the summer you can park one of your cars in the driveway and use the bay to keep the active vehicles that your family or your children are using. But you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can just get a couple of basic products, and they'll be able to accommodate everything you have.
I know one of the products I got is a thing that holds all your garden tools, like your shovel, your rake, and it has the little holes in it that you line these things. And it takes such a small amount of real estate, and it's just a great thing. So yeah, I think there are a lot of things available for that.
There are tons of things, yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to go back inside the house and talk more about space planning in the different rooms within the house. I think we've covered the garage well, and I think, again, it's one of those things where, like you say, if you get the garage taken care of, if anything, at least to help you stage some of the stuff you're moving out while you're getting the inside organized. So we're with Shauna Turner from the Shauna Method, and we'll be right back. With the size of office and desk space shrinking, it's time to get creative when organizing. Introducing the Cascading Wall Organizer by Smead. The Cascading Wall Organizer saves desk space by utilizing often overlooked wall space. The 6 cascading pockets are removable to make viewing and accessing documents easy, while the elastic cord closure allows for security when transporting your files. With each pocket being able to hold 25 sheets of paper, that makes for a whole lot of storage right on your wall or door. No desktop space required. The clear front pocket is perfect for storing a calendar or small items that need to be accessed daily. This organizer is made from acid-free poly material, which makes it tear-proof and water-resistant. The Cascading Wall Organizer from Smead, keeping you organized. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about space planning. And before the break, we were in the garage coming up with all kinds of great ideas to make that space very efficient. We're joined by Shauna Turner from the Shauna Method. And Shauna, okay, let's get back inside the house. And I know in a lot of houses, at least in our house, the kitchen is one of those areas that's kind of like the congregating area. Everybody spends a lot of time in there. What are some space planning tips or tricks or ideas for your kitchen?
Right. So for the kitchen is, of course, the heart of the home, and everyone comes in and dumps their stuff. So the best thing you can do is to try to establish some zones in your kitchen. So you don't want someone doing homework or dumping keys where you're trying to actually prepare food. So it's important to designate, might be my cooking zone, and this part of the counter, you just tell the family you can't put anything there. This needs to be clean so that I can do food prep. Perhaps if you have kids who want to do homework, you could designate a section of the table, or maybe you can sit over there on that side of the island while I cook on this side of the island. Another thing you can do is you can use your walls. Again, I'm a big fan of using your walls. So everywhere you have a wall, perhaps inside the back of a pantry door or a pantry wall, hang some hooks and make stuff be able to be off of your counter, because it's items piling on the counter that tends to create the stress in the kitchen. Another thing that you can do is have some bins with supplies, and they don't have to be stored in the kitchen, but they can be brought to the kitchen for when an activity is going to take place there. So again, a common example is children might want to come home after school and do their homework somewhere near mom while she's cooking or getting ready for supper. So you can have a bucket or a bin or a tote that has all the supplies they're going to need, a calculator, their pencils, their rulers, whatever they may need. They can bring it to the kitchen, do their work, but then when it's time for the serious food prep or you need to clear the space to set up to eat, it's easy to take those supplies, put them back in the tote, and then move them out of the room where they're stored.
Okay, how about the one thing that I know just about everybody has? It's that kitchen junk drawer. The one drawer where it's kind of miscellaneous everything, everything from paper clips. How do you deal with that junk drawer?
Yeah, so I tell almost every client that I don't believe in the junk drawer because we don't buy junk. So I think that it's very important to organize that drawer that has those critical supplies, and like every other space, to designate a subsection of the drawer for each of the supplies. Believe it or not, people will stick with it if it's easy to use. So it just a simple office supply drawer insert can go into your junk drawer, and then there's a place where the scissors go, there's a place where the ruler goes, a place for the tape, little places where you can keep the thumbtacks and the paper clips and the binder clips and the erasers. Once it's organized, especially if you label the sections, family members tend to stick with it because they so enjoy being able to put their hands on exactly what they want instead of opening that drawer and seeing that mess. Now, the other thing about the junk drawer is a lot of times when you take stuff out of a space, you find things in there that don't belong. So the hammer that you pulled out to fix something and then you shoved it in that drawer because somebody was coming over and you didn't want them to see it, those items need to be taken out of that high prime real estate drawer and returned elsewhere in the home where they live. So that's a good thing to do every now and then, and maybe every couple of months. If you feel like your drawers just, you can't even get it open, it's time to go through because you probably have some items in there that need to go back to some other room in your house.
Now, when you're done working with a client, do you have like a training session for the family? I'm trying to think about how do I get my teenage kids to follow along with this method, you know?
So teenagers are a special thing all on their own. And my bargain with the teenagers is their own rooms. I kind of leave to be their own space. Maybe you negotiate this every 2 weeks, you clean it up or whatever. But the common spaces you have to participate in, just like every other member of the family. You have to respect the system. And the number one way to train the family is to label the locations because it's hard for someone who comes in who maybe wasn't part of the organizing process to know where everything suddenly is supposed to be. But if there's a label there that says pens or Sharpies or scissors or a bag that you've hung that says used batteries, most people are willing to stick with the system if it's just as easy.
Right.
So that's another thing I try to do is make it just as easy to put items away as it was to take them out. If you have to pull out 4 cabinets or lift lids, then maybe it's difficult to put away. That's when people stash because they don't want to take the time to lift the lid and put it away. But if you organize it and you label it, and if you have small children who don't read, I might put labels with pictures in a toy room or something so they can see, oh, this is where my crayons go or this is where my trucks go. Just by following the picture. People like to put things back if it's easy.
Right. Well, I'm sure there's a point where you're faced with the decision that, we don't have enough space and we've got to move some stuff off-site. What are kind of the criteria for that and how do you have that discussion?
So self-storage is a fantastic option for very specific situations. So when I have a client who comes to me and says, I think maybe I need a storage unit, I walk with them through something of a decision tree to see if they actually do or not. So we begin by looking at their belongings and doing sort of the hard work of sorting through and saying, have you culled through? Are you sure that everything that's here is stuff that you love and use and want? Generally speaking, we'll eliminate some items at that point. And I remind people that when you shop for a house, you'll frequently see, well, this house is so and so dollars per square foot. So it does cost to store things, whether they're in your house or in an off-site location, you're paying. So you want to make sure that if you're deciding to keep an item, that you're willing to pay the money to keep it. So when you think about it that way, sometimes it helps you get rid of a few things.
Right.
So that's the first question that I ask. Then I ask, is it something that you need regular access to? So if it's something you might need every week, that's not a good candidate to go off-site. It's just not convenient enough. But maybe you have some belongings that you're holding for a future family member or were handed down to you and you don't have any need now, but you anticipate having a future need and you just need to hold them for a while and you're willing to pay the hold cost, okay, that's one step closer to considering self-storage. And then I generally ask, how long do you anticipate having this need? Because self-storage is one of those tricky situations that you get into at a cheap price and you think it's going to be for a short term, and then before you know it, years have passed and you spent a lot of money. I had one client who went in, and I believe it was $20 a month when this couple began storing items, and they had their unit for more than 15 years. And by the time that they closed it out, they were paying almost $125 a month. So we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. And when we got over to the unit to actually empty it out, I could see that practically everything in it was stuff that they were ready to get rid of and hadn't touched for years. So I always caution it's a bit of a red light if you don't have a deadline for the when you will no longer need to be storing. It's a wonderful solution if you're, for example, staging your house and you need to get some of the clutter temporarily away. Or if you're being deployed overseas and you need to store some things while you're serving an active duty. Or if you're temporarily between homes and you need to store your furniture until your new home becomes available. Those are all terrific situations. And then if you go through the whole decision tree and you say, yes, 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 and I think I'm ready and I'm ready to spend the money, then it's the details of finding a facility that is insured and climate controlled and accessible to you and has a rate that you're willing to pay.
Right. Well, that could be a big mistake. Are there other space planning mistakes common ones that people should avoid?
Yes, there are a couple of mistakes that I see over and over. First, as I said, is that people just try to keep too much. They underestimate what they have, and they keep more than they're actually even using. So that's really a simple mistake. But if you've already gone through your belongings, some other mistakes that people make is they try to overfill their containers. So it's always good when you're setting up a system to have a little growing room because new items do come into your life. So going back to your kitchen example, if I were to take a drawer and line all the spices that I had up in it and I filled the drawer completely, well, what happens when, next week someone makes a new recipe and they buy 2 new spices, they bring them home, but they don't fit in the drawer. So then I stash them somewhere else. Well, suddenly your system's broken because then you're having to remember, well, was that a spice I put in the cabinet or was that a spice I put in the drawer? So I always say, have a little growing space, leave a little extra room. Another mistake that people make is they go shopping and buy supplies or furniture before they know what they have to store. So they think, I have too many books, and they buy a bookshelf. And that can be a mistake because then you just have too much furniture now. Instead of going through and saying, which books do I really want to keep? And which books do I want to keep downstairs versus which books am I saving to give to my grandchildren? So first you sort, then you shop. Don't buy the furniture first. Buy the furniture and the bins and the products last. Save that to be sort of a reward of having gotten rid of what you know that you don't need. And then the third mistake that I see a lot is that people keep the wrong items in their what I call prime real estate. And that would be the easily reached spaces in your home. So if you're at your desk, the drawers that you can reach on your right and left or right in front of you, those are your prime real estate. That's not the place to be keeping your tax records from 2008. You need to keep your tax records for 2008, but you don't want them in your desk because that's where you need to be keeping what you're going to be pulling out and using every day. So it's great to go through and find those items that you need to keep and perhaps find reliably, but that you're not touching frequently. And let's move those to remote locations such as an attic or a basement or under a bed or even on a high shelf in a closet. And let's free up that space that you can reach or that low shelf in the kitchen that you can reach for the items you're using every day.
Well, those are some incredible tips. And I think, just looking at space as a way to approach organizing. And we haven't even talked about things like time management and some of those other things. We'll have to do that on another show because we're out of time here. I want to give you the opportunity to let people know where they can get a hold of you. Do you do virtual coaching or are you just in your local area? Tell us a little bit about your practice.
So my company is out of Darien, Connecticut.
Okay.
And so I mostly work with people who are in my area. But I do virtual coaching, especially if you have a very specific problem. We can do a Skype situation, and I can see your scene and your space and talk you through some solutions and tips, and then touch base and hold people accountable. I'm reachable on my website, which is theshawnamethod.com, and on all the social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus and all those goodies, Pinterest. So love to have people come by and share their questions or their thoughts or their comments.
Well, that is awesome. And we'll hook those sites up in our show notes for people that maybe are driving right now and listening or don't have the opportunity to write that down. The Shauna Method. Shauna Turner, thank you so much for joining us today. It's just been a great way to look at space. I wish we had more space in the show to to talk more, but we'll get you back again to talk about some of the other aspects of organizing as well.
It's been a lot of fun, John. Thanks so much.
Great. Shauna Turner from the Shauna Method today on Keeping You Organized.